All those years ago, it seems a long time now, 1997, a beautiful spring day, the Conservatives had been defeated, people were rejoicing all over the country. And who would have thought that nearly a decade later, we would be looking at the face of this Prime Minister and saying, this is the Prime Minister representing the Labour Party in the trade union movement, who has taken us into more wars than Margaret Thatcher and John Major put together, who has spilled more blood than the Tories before him ever did, whose policies have resulted in the loss of lives now in this country. I think we have to start with that, because there's no point whatsoever of being on the defensive. The reason these unfortunate, misguided kids went and did what they did on the London Underground was not because they were Muslims. One of the suspects of a few weeks later, who was captured in Italy, Hussein Osman, when he was interrogated by the Italians' secret police, they of course leaked the stuff immediately the next day to the papers, and he told the Italian press, we were not discussing religion. Yeah, I'm a Muslim. We were not discussing religion. We were not discussing verses from the Quran. We were looking at videos of Iraq. We were looking at what was happening in Fallujah. We were looking at the women and children who were being killed. Now, of course, if he'd come to me and said that, I'd have said, killing civilians in Britain isn't going to help you defeat Blair. It plays into Blair's hands. If you want to defeat Blair, then you have to find other ways of doing it. It's no good doing it by force and violence in these individual ways and taking your own lives. We don't want you to kill anyone, and we don't want you to take your own lives either, because your lives are equally precious. No one says that. But I feel for these kids who were forced to do it. Young people growing up in this country, seeing the government make war, getting misled. But you know something? We have been here before. Ireland. Remember, the young ones amongst you won't remember, the older ones here, we knew what was going on then. In the early 70s, on a peaceful day in the town of Derry, the British troops opened fire on a peaceful demonstration and shot Irish people dead. They killed them, just like that, shooting to kill. Snipers from the SAS and other regiments. And what happened? Everyone now knows it, the government has admitted it. That single act caused a massive upheaval in the Irish community in Northern Ireland, and by the way here, and people were queuing from the next day onwards to join the IRA and say, train us because we will go and get revenge. That's what happened in Ireland. And it took decades to bring that to an end. And the way they brought it to an end was not by going and bombing Derry, not by bombing Belfast, though they did lots of horrible things. They brought in laws to arrest people without trial. After a bombing in Birmingham, they arrested innocent people, beat them up in prison and charged them just to show we've caught someone. They did the same in Guildford. And where did it get them? Ultimately, they had to come to the table and talk to the IRA and Sinn Féin. And that's when a ceasefire was agreed. And that's the way it should be. So I am not prepared to be the least bit apologetic to a government for what happened in London when it's the policies of that government which led to it, like it did in Ireland. And it's not just people like us who are saying this. The Foreign Office, in a private letter, the senior civil servant at the Foreign Office told Downing Street 1 year before, there is great anger in the Muslim communities because of our foreign policy. British intelligence warned them that this was going on. And then this government has the nerve, and for 2 weeks after July the 7th, no one is allowed to mention Iraq. No one is allowed to mention Iraq, because that is to justify terrorism. Nonsense! That is to explain the political roots of terrorism. Because you have to explain it politically. The only other option is to do what Blair did, or Hazel Blair's, or some of these other anonymous idiots who work with Blair. It's civilizational. It's a clash of civilizations. There's something hidden inside the Muslim religion. Well, no one said this about Catholicism during the Irish struggles, that it's hidden within the Catholic religion, that they have to come and blow up Downing Street, or try and kill the British cabinet when they tried to blow up the Grand Hotel in Brighton. It was a political thing, and this too is a political matter. It's wrong, but it's political. And incidentally, there is an American academic, Robert Pape, at the University of Chicago, who has for the last 25 years been working on a project on suicide terrorism. He's just produced a book. And in this book, and he studied every single case, and he says religion is sometimes used as an excuse, but whether it's Tamils in Sri Lanka, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, the reasons are always political. And I think we have to stress this, because July the 7th has now created a political, cultural, and legal crisis for the British government. Politically, their Iraq policy is in tatters. A majority of this country doesn't support it. Culturally, they're trying to wage war on a community in this country. A large Muslim community which is by no means monolithic, any more than any other community is monolithic. People have cultural values, they have religious values, they disagree with each other on 101 things, cultural things, political things, interpretation of religion, whatever. It's not monolithic. So why make this the central issue? In order to try and divert public opinion from this ugly, filthy, obscene war that you are waging in Iraq, and from the support that you have been giving Israel for the last 30 years. You know, and that angers me, that these questions now should be brought up. I mean, it's a pity Michael Meach has gone, because what I was going to say to Michael, and if the video is taken, you can send him one, that we need a team of members of parliament. Galloway alone isn't enough. We need a team of members of parliament from the Labour Party, from the Liberals, whoever, to now make a big fight against the government, both on the Iraq war and on the question of civil liberties. It could even extend broader than that, because who would have thought that a former Tory cabinet minister in Margaret Thatcher's government, a former Chancellor, a former Home Secretary, declares that he's standing for the leadership of the Conservative Party, and he's well to the left of the new Labour government on most issues. He's against the Iraq war, he voted against it, he wants to withdraw the troops, he said so, and he's committed himself quite strongly to making the link between Iraq and July the 7th, and he did something which few Labour MPs I've heard doing these days recently, attacked torture and the use of extreme rendition when prisoners are sent from Iraq and Palestine to be tortured in puppet states owned by the Americans in different parts of the world. A conservative politician, a senior conservative politician, is now doing this. That's the state we are at. So what are we going to do? Well, we will march on the 24th, and let me just stress to you how important this march is. This is the first public gathering of the anti-war and peace movements since July the 7th. Their aim, what they were hoping, was that they would create such a climate of fear that people would be scared to come out again for a considerable period of time. And on the 24th of September, we say to them, no, we are not scared, we are here, and we will carry on coming out as long as you are there. We're not going to... Now, you know, we hear all the time from these wretched politicians when they talk. The Anglo-Saxon variety are the worst. The Americans and their camp followers here. What do they say whenever there's a terrorist attack? Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Condi Rice, Blair, Jack Straw, Blunkett of blessed memory, and others. What do they say? We will not allow these terrorists to change our way of life. Well, 2 points on this. A, they're not trying to change your way of life. That's not what they're after. They're just opposed to you trying to change their way of life back where they live. But secondly, even though you say you're not going to permit them to change your way of life, you are changing it. You are changing it when you have Homeland Security and the Patriot Act in the United States. You are changing it in Britain, whereas John Rees has stressed, when you are passing in laws which challenge the fundamentals of natural law which has been in this country since the Magna Carta. Habeas corpus no longer applies now in Britain under these laws. And they lied. In December 2001, after 9/11, they went and asked the European Council to allow them to temporarily suspend Section 5 of the Human Rights Act so they could arrest people and detain them indefinitely without trial. Why? Because they had their eye on 10 or 12 people, mainly Islamists, refugees from Algeria and other places, not people I have the slightest agreement with, by the way. That's not the point. The point is, no one should be locked up like this. No one without having a due process, being charged and found guilty or not guilty, then released. But they were taken to Belmarsh prison in southeast London and locked up. And we hear about Guantanamo, about horrific things going on in Guantanamo, which is true. Recently, an American soldier was tried for being completely out of control. And when he was asked in a court, were you urinating deliberately on the Quran to try and insult and humiliate the Muslim prisoners there? He replied, no, it was an accident. Actually, I was urinating on the prisoner and some drops fell on the Quran that he was holding. Think about this. Just think about this statement. That's what he said. Now, if this is the level they've reached in Guantanamo, don't think it's much better in Belmarsh, that this is nice old England. These things don't happen here. Some of the prisoners in Belmarsh have been so severely tortured, psychologically we hope, it hasn't been physical either, but it doesn't make any difference, that 3 of them have gone completely mad, and have been transferred by the government from Belmarsh to Broadmoor Mental Prison. Whose name is this being done in? This is what I was going to say to Michael. Why don't we have 10 or 12 MPs demanding replies on this? And the reason no one does is because the government knows that we don't agree with these people, many of them. And so they use that fact to say, oh, these are particularly wicked, evil people. Well, that's not good enough, I'm afraid. It's not good enough. They should not be in that prison. Try them, charge them. It's because they have no evidence at all to accuse them of anything except hearsay. And the ones, okay,